They say you can tell a man's story by the road he rides. That day, outside a small-town diner, a group of loud bikers roared in with their polished chrome and leather jackets, laughing at a figure sitting quietly by his motorcycle. His bike was old, paint chipped, engine coughing like it had seen too many winters. To them, it looked like a relic, a joke on two wheels. They sneered, cracked jokes, and called him Grandpa Rider. But the man never fired back. He simply adjusted his worn leather vest, the edges frayed from decades of sun and rain. And that's when one of them saw it. Stitched into the vest was a faded patch, not of a local club, not of a brand, but one that froze the laughter in their throats. It was the patch of an elite special forces unit, a symbol that whispered stories of shadowy missions, unshakable brotherhood, and sacrifices only a few could imagine. The mockery died. Silence fell. And suddenly, that old man on an old bike became something else entirely. A living reminder of courage, sacrifice, and a legacy no machine could ever outshine. The diner's neon sign buzzed faintly in the morning air, its glow spilling onto the cracked parking lot. It was the kind of place where truckers stopped for coffee and where local bikers gathered before long weekend rides. On this day, a veteran sat alone near the edge of the lot, his motorcycle resting on its stand. It was no ordinary machine. The paint was faded, dulled by years of sun and rain. The seat had been patched more than once with tape and worn leather. The chrome had long since lost its shine. To the untrained eye, it was just an old, tired bike, a relic ready for the scrapyard. But to the man who sat beside it, it was more than a motorcycle. It was a vessel of memory, carrying decades of stories, some too heavy to speak aloud. His hands, calloused and rough, rested on the handlebars. Every scar on his knuckles told a story of discipline and endurance. His eyes, steady, weathered, and unflinching, studied the horizon as if waiting for something. To the bikers who rolled in, laughing and revving their engines, he looked like a ghost from another time. "Nice antique, old-timer," one of them shouted, parking his gleaming Harley beside the veteran's motorcycle. His friends laughed, their voices carrying across the lot. The veteran said nothing. He had learned long ago that silence often spoke louder than words. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a pack of cigarettes, and lit one. The flick of the lighter revealed his face more clearly, creased with age, but strong, as though time itself had tried and failed to break him. The bikers continued their taunts. "Does that thing even run? Or do you push it to get here?" Another laugh. "Man, that's embarrassing. Get yourself a real bike." He exhaled smoke slowly, watching it curl upward. The laughter didn't sting him. He had been mocked before, in places far darker than this parking lot. He had faced storms of fire and steel, where ridicule was the least of his worries. To endure humiliation was easy compared to the weight of watching brothers fall in battle. One biker leaned closer, squinting at the vest the man wore. Unlike theirs, adorned with colorful patches of local motorcycle clubs, his vest was plain. It was worn down, edges fraying, the leather cracked. But stitched over his heart was a single patch. The biker froze. His smirk faltered. He took a step back. It wasn't just any patch. It was the emblem of a special forces unit, one recognized only by those who knew what it meant. A symbol of warriors trained to endure the impossible, to fight in silence, and to sacrifice without recognition. A patch earned only by walking through hell and returning with scars invisible to most of the world. "What's that?" another biker asked, noticing his friend's sudden pause. The first biker pointed. The laughter around them faded into silence as each of them recognized the patch for what it was, or at least sensed its weight. They weren't looking at a worn-out man anymore. They were staring at someone who had lived through trials they could never imagine. The veteran flicked the ash from his cigarette, his voice low, gravelly, but steady when he finally spoke. "This old bike carried me home when nothing else could." The bikers shifted uneasily, no longer laughing. There was something in his tone, a depth of truth, a rawness, that silenced the air. They realized they weren't mocking just a man or his motorcycle. They had mocked a survivor, a fighter, an unsung hero who carried the unseen burdens of a soldier's sacrifice. The parking lot grew quiet. Even the neon sign seemed to buzz softer. For the veteran, moments like this weren't about pride. They were about respect, not for himself, but for the brothers he once stood beside. Men who had ridden into battle but never rode back. Men whose stories were lost to history, forgotten heroes buried beneath silence. His patch wasn't just a reminder of his own service. It was a tribute to all of them. He inhaled deeply, as if breathing in memories only he could see, then exhaled again. In that quiet smoke, the bikers caught a glimpse of something far greater than leather jackets and weekend rides. They saw battlefield courage. They saw soldier sacrifice. They saw real war heroes, not in movies or books, but standing right in front of them, wearing a vest, sitting on an old motorcycle that was more than steel and wheels. And in that moment, the air shifted. Respect, unspoken, but heavy, settled over the group. The silence in the parking lot lingered like smoke after a battlefield fire. The bikers shifted awkwardly, their earlier laughter now echoing in their minds like a mistake too late to take back. The old man's patch spoke louder than their words ever could. But what they didn't know was that the motorcycle beneath him carried a story deeper than oil and steel. The veteran reached down, patting the gas tank of his bike like one might rest a hand on an old friend's shoulder. The machine wheezed faintly as though in agreement, a tired companion that had traveled more roads than most men could dream of. This bike, he began slowly, his voice gravelly but steady, wasn't bought in a showroom. It was given to me, by a brother who never came home. The words cut through the air, sharp as a knife. The bikers listened, their bravado dissolving into stillness. He took another drag from his cigarette before continuing. We were young, kids, really, sent halfway across the world with orders we barely understood. We carried rifles heavier than our fears and lived by the creed that no man was left behind. In the jungle, in the heat, in the silence of places where death watched from every shadow, we found strength in each other. That's where I met Danny. He paused, his eyes far away now, as though replaying scenes etched forever in memory. Danny had this laugh, loud, unshakable, like he wasn't afraid of anything. Even when bullets tore through the air, he'd grin and say, "We'll make it out. We always do." He was more than a soldier. He was a brother. And when we weren't fighting, he'd talk about this motorcycle he wanted to rebuild when he got back. Said he wanted to ride across the states, wind in his face, free as the road itself. The bikers leaned in, their own engines quiet now, their helmets hanging loosely in their hands. But one night, the veteran continued, his voice tightening, freedom wasn't meant for all of us. An ambush. One moment we were laughing, the next, he stopped, swallowed hard, his hand trembling slightly. Danny didn't make it. He fell right there, and I couldn't stop it. No patch, no training, no strength could change that. For a long moment, his voice failed him. The parking lot was silent except for the hum of a distant highway. When I got home, he finally said, Danny's parents gave me this bike. It wasn't much back then. Rust, broken parts, more memory than machine. But I promised myself I'd ride it in his honor. Every mile I put on this bike is a mile Danny never got to ride. Every road is a promise kept. The bikers' faces softened. No one dared interrupt. This wasn't just emotional storytelling. It was truth, laid bare in the open air. He tapped the patch on his vest. This isn't about me. It's about men like Danny. Unsung heroes. Forgotten heroes. Real war heroes who gave everything and got nothing in return. Not medals, not parades, not even a proper thank you. This patch is a military tribute. Every stitch carries blood, sweat, and sacrifice. Soldier sacrifice. The kind the world moves on from too quickly. One biker, the tallest of the group, finally spoke. His voice was quiet, almost apologetic. You carried that all these years. The veteran nodded. Carried it, lived it, buried it. That's what you do when you survive. You carry their stories so the world doesn't forget. That's why I ride this old machine. Because when people see me, they see rust and age. But when I see it, I see Danny riding beside me. I hear his laugh in the wind. I feel the brotherhood that war tried to take away. A lump formed in the throat of one of the younger bikers. His eyes darted between the old man and the bike, suddenly realizing how small his own life struggles seemed compared to the weight this veteran carried every day. The veteran leaned back, exhaling his final puff of smoke. Respect isn't about chrome or leather. It's not about how loud your pipes are or how shiny your jacket looks. Respect is about sacrifice. About remembering the ones who gave you the freedom to ride at all. The group was silent. Some lowered their heads. Others clenched their fists, not out of anger but out of a quiet shame. One biker finally stepped forward and held out his hand. "Sir, we didn't know. We should have." The old man shook it firmly, his grip strong but not boastful. "Now you do. And that's enough." The veteran didn't crave recognition. He wasn't telling his story to impress anyone. He told it because stories keep the fallen alive. Stories make sure the forgotten heroes remain remembered. And in telling it, he had turned a group of mocking strangers into men who now stood in the presence of something greater than themselves. The bikers no longer saw an old man with a broken-down motorcycle. They saw a living memorial, a guardian of a brother's memory, and a symbol of battlefield courage that time could never erase. And for the first time since they had arrived, they looked at him not with mockery, but with reverence. For a long time after the veteran finished speaking, no one dared to break the silence. The sound of the highway in the distance filled the space where their laughter once was. The men who had arrived proud, loud, and careless now stood humbled, their eyes fixed on the old warrior before them. The youngest of the bikers, barely in his 20s, finally muttered, "We shouldn't have mocked you." His voice cracked, and he lowered his head as though ashamed of the arrogance he had carried minutes earlier. The veteran gave a small nod, not with bitterness, but with understanding. "Son," he said quietly, "I've been called worse by men who mattered less. What you do now, that's what counts." The leader of the biker group, a tall man with tattoos running down both arms, removed his sunglasses. His eyes, hardened by years on the road, softened in a way his friends had never seen before. He stepped closer to the veteran, looking at the patch again. "Special Forces," he whispered, almost reverently. "That's no small thing. My uncle served. He never talked about it much, but when he came home, he wasn't the same." The veteran inhaled deeply, nodding. "None of us came back the same. We left pieces of ourselves behind, sometimes in the mud, sometimes in the silence after the fight. But we carry on, because carrying on means carrying them with us." The words struck the bikers deeply. These were not lines from a movie, not rehearsed speeches. This was truth, carved into the soul of a man who had seen the worst and still found a way to live. The biker leader cleared his throat. "Sir, would you ride with us today? I think we could learn something." The veteran hesitated. He wasn't used to invitations. 4 years, he had ridden alone, just him and the memories. But there was something in their eyes now, something different. Not pity, not curiosity, but respect. He stubbed out his cigarette on the pavement and stood. The leather vest shifted on his shoulders, the Special Forces patch catching the light. He swung his leg over the bike, the old frame creaking as it took his weight. The machine coughed to life, engine sputtering at first before finding its rhythm, like an old soldier answering roll call. The bikers mounted their own motorcycles. Their engines roared, but this time there was no mockery in the sound. Instead, it was a salute, steel and gasoline acknowledging something greater than themselves. They rode together, out of the lot, onto the open road. The veteran in the middle of the pack, his old bike keeping pace with the newer machines. The wind rushed against their faces, but the silence between them was filled with meaning. As the miles passed, the bikers began to notice something. The veteran's posture was different from theirs. He didn't ride to show off, didn't lean for style. He rode steady, precise, like every mile was sacred. Like the road itself was holy ground. At a rest stop, one of the younger bikers asked, "Why do you ride like that?" The veteran looked at him, a faint smile touching his lips. "Because every ride could be my last. Every mile is a gift. And I ride for someone who can't. The group fell silent again, his words sinking in deeper than any lecture or sermon could. For hours, they rode together, weaving through highways and back roads. Along the way, strangers noticed the odd mix. A pack of shiny bikes surrounding one old machine with a rider who looked like he had seen 100 lives pass before his eyes. People waved. Some saluted. And though the veteran never sought recognition, he gave a small nod in return, acknowledging the respect that, for once, didn't feel forced. By the time they circled back to the diner, something had shifted permanently. The bikers no longer saw themselves as just weekend riders. They saw themselves as carriers of a story now entrusted to them. As they parked, the leader of the group turned to the veteran. "Sir," he said, his voice firm, "you may ride alone in miles, but you'll never ride alone in spirit again. We'll remember Danny. We'll remember all of them." The veteran's eyes glistened, though he quickly looked away. He wasn't a man who cried easily, but the weight of hearing strangers vow to remember his fallen brother struck him harder than he expected. "You honor me," he said softly. "But more importantly, you honor them. And that means everything." The bikers formed a circle around him, their bikes framing the old machine at the center. What had begun as laughter had transformed into something like a ritual, a living military tribute. The patch on his vest was no longer a mystery to them. It was a symbol, a reminder of soldier sacrifice and battlefield courage. It was the mark of real war heroes, the unsung heroes whose stories lived only when others chose to tell them. The youngest biker reached out, hesitated, then gently touched the veteran's bike. "I'll never laugh at something old again," he said quietly. "Because now I know, old doesn't mean weak. Old means it survived." The veteran placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. "And surviving means remembering why you're still here." For the first time in years, the veteran didn't feel like a ghost riding alone. He felt seen, not as a man to be pitied, but as a bridge to the forgotten heroes who still deserved to be honored. The sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting long shadows across the lot. But those shadows no longer felt heavy. They felt like company, like the silhouettes of brothers still riding beside him. The parking lot was quiet again, but the air felt different, heavier with meaning, lighter with understanding. The veteran sat on his motorcycle, listening to the tick of the cooling engine. Around him, the bikers lingered, reluctant to simply ride off as if nothing had happened. Something had changed inside them. The leader of the group stepped forward once more. His voice, which had carried such arrogance hours before, now carried only respect. "Sir," he began, "I know nothing we do can match what you've given, what you and your brothers gave. But we want to honor you. We want to honor Danny." The veteran's brows furrowed. He wasn't used to men like these seeking to give back. His life had been built on quiet endurance, on carrying the memory of fallen comrades alone. But now they were asking to share the weight. "What do you have in mind?" he asked softly. The leader looked around at his brothers, who nodded silently. "A ride," he said. "Every year, we'll ride in Danny's name. And in the name of every soldier who never made it home. No sponsors, no banners, no bragging. Just the road, the wind, and remembrance." The veteran's throat tightened. He stared at them for a long time, searching their faces for any hint of mockery, of empty promises. But all he saw were men who had been humbled, men who had been changed. "Then ride," the veteran whispered. "Ride for them. Ride because they can't." A ripple of emotion moved through the group. Helmets were strapped on, engines roared again. But this time the sound was not careless noise. It was a salute. Steel, rubber, and thunder rolling together like a drumbeat of remembrance. The veteran kicked his old machine to life once more. The bike coughed, sputtered, then roared, the sound blending with the chorus of engines around him. Together, they pulled out onto the road, not as strangers, but as a brotherhood bound not by patches on leather, but by respect, memory, and soldier sacrifice. As they rode, cars pulled to the side, drivers staring at the formation of motorcycles thundering past. At the center was the veteran, his vest carrying that special forces patch, his head lifted high against the wind. He didn't crave recognition, but for the first time in years, he felt as though the road itself was bearing witness. Miles blurred beneath their wheels. Small towns watched in silence as the riders thundered through, a living military tribute carried out not in words, but in motion. It was emotional storytelling written not on paper, but across the highways of America. At sunset, they stopped on a hill overlooking endless fields. The horizon glowed orange and gold, the sky burning like the last moments of a day well lived. The bikers dismounted, forming a quiet circle. The leader pulled a flask from his jacket, pouring a small measure of whiskey onto the ground. "For Danny," he said simply. The others followed, each adding their own silent gesture, removing hats, lowering heads, pressing hands to hearts. They were not soldiers, but in that moment, they honored the fallen with the sincerity of warriors. The veteran stood silently, his eyes locked on the horizon. He saw more than fields. He saw the faces of men long gone, unsung heroes who had laughed, fought, and bled beside him. He felt them there in the wind, in the thunder of the motorcycles, in the silence of the moment. And for the first time in decades, he didn't feel alone. He spoke quietly, but the words carried weight. "You are remembered. You are not forgotten. As long as I ride, you ride with me." A single tear slid down his cheek, though he didn't wipe it away. It wasn't shame, it was release. The bikers, moved beyond words, stood in silence with him until the last glow of sun dipped below the horizon. In that quiet, they realized something profound, that sometimes the greatest heroic acts are not the battles fought with rifles, but the battles fought with memory, choosing to carry the weight of forgotten heroes so the world never loses them. When they mounted their bikes again, the veteran felt a peace he hadn't known in years. His motorcycle, that battered old machine, seemed to roar with renewed strength, as if it too understood that Danny's name, and the names of countless others, would now ride forever in more than just one man's heart. As the night fell and headlights cut through the darkness, the veteran allowed himself a rare smile. He wasn't just a rider on an old motorcycle anymore. He was part of something greater again. He had passed the torch of remembrance to new hands. And he knew, deep in his soul, that Danny would have approved.